Psychologists say that there is something called toxic anxiety, that a person can be so paralyzed by what ifs, can so focus on all the bad things that can happen, that is how their perception will be skewed indelibly. And that these toxic worriers, seeing only the bad, only what they're sure will happen, are 2.5 times more likely to have a heart attack. Toxic worriers, they say, are those people who don't worry a thing to death, but they worry it to life. And they create a big green Frankenstein that they see lumbering their way, when in actuality, Frankensteins don't and can never exist. Reverend Emmanuel Cleaver is a United Methodist clergyman and also a U.S. congressman from the Kansas City area. And I heard him once say that there was a toxic worrier in his church, Bob, we'll call him. And he said that he got tired finally of hearing Bob always talk about all the things he was worried about. So he said to Bob one day, "Bob, I wish you would just stop worrying. I wish you would stop it. I mean, worrying does no good." "Oh, Reverend, yes, it does do good." "How can worrying do any good?" "Reverend, I want to tell you, everything I have ever worried about that would happen to me has never happened. So you tell me it doesn't do any good." That's the way I feel, too. And I have to admit, I am preaching this to you, I'm mostly preaching this to me, because I know the times when I have worried something to life, but when I look back, I can't think of a time when it actually happened. And maybe it might have happened, but there were sources and resources that came to my aid that makes me even forget about it right now. Do you know what I mean? And yet, false evidence that appears real, we make it alive in our minds. And sometimes we skew our perception so negatively that we cast God in that same light. If you read carefully the parable, that's what the servant did. Just before he said, "I was afraid," he said, "I knew you, master, to be a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow. I knew you to be a harsh, hard, mean, cruel man." There is no setup in the parable that would show that master to be that way. It was in the servant's mind. Could it be that we cannot overcome our fears because deep down we sometimes see God as a harsh God? Consequently, we don't measure up and can't be forgiven or forgive ourselves. Can that be? One of my favorite commercials, I have to say, is that auto insurance commercial where a voice is heard saying, "Do ex-Army drill sergeants make good therapists?" And you see the therapist office, and the young man's on the couch saying, "And that's why the color yellow makes me sad." To which the ex-drill sergeant with the crew cut, making notes, and says, "Interesting. You know what makes me sad?" "You do!" And the guy jumps. And we think that's who God is sometimes, deep down. "You make me sad. You don't measure up. Why don't we go down to namby-pamby land and find you some self-confidence?" That's our primordial thought sometimes about who God is. And there is nothing but a false view of God, because if you listen to the words of Jesus, if you see the portrait Jesus paints about God, the Father, the parent, that's the exact opposite of being a harsh master. No, God portrayed by Jesus, the God who made Christ's heart beat at a rapid rate with excitement and joy, that God is the one who believes in you, who trusts you with the resources, who wants to make you happy investing in the kingdom, who believes in you, loves you, and gives you grace and forgiveness, more than ample enough for life. That is a God of Jesus. That is a God He died and lives again to portray for us. So if indeed this is who God is, why in the world would we dare have a false perception of Him and let Him even contribute to our fears? We cannot do that, because the sin of the Christian is to think that God is someone other than who Jesus portrayed Him to be. I like what one theologian said. Jesus did not say, look at the ostrich, how it buries its head in the sand. Nope. He said, look at the birds of the air. Keep your eyes open. Stand up straight. Look to the heights where God makes known God's grace and care. Well, folks, if we are worthy of the name Christian, thanks be to God's grace, then we have the right, the duty, and the privilege to be able to stand up straight and look into the sky, look to the mountains from whence our help comes. Shel Silverstein, noted poet and cartoonist that many of us have heard of, penned these words referring to imagination. He said, "You have a magic carpet that will whiz you through the air to Maine or Spain or Africa if you just tell it where. So will you let it take you where you've never been before, or will you buy some drapes to match and use it on your floor?" And a student at the University of Missouri added these lines, "You have a God who loves you more than earthly love compares. You have a God of power and might who can take you everywhere. So will you let God take you where you've never been before, or will you be too scared and live your life behind closed doors?" Well, friends, in a few minutes, those shades are going to rise, and the doors will open. Are you going to leave with eyes still blinded by F-E-A-R? Or will you leave with eyes open to a very bright, colorful world, an invitation that Christ gives you? You know the answer. You know how you will leave, because you know there is nothing to fear. Nothing to fear.